Hello, everyone, and welcome to the lecture on addressing sexual harassment and assault in science settings. My name is Robin Nelson, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Human Evolution and Social Change at Arizona State University. By way of introductions, I would like to say that I am a biological anthropologist who studies human biology, and I often do this research in places beyond my home setting in Arizona. For this work, I have traveled to the Caribbean, Canada, and Texas, and I am often working in coordination with other researchers and people in the community. Negotiating proper attention to detail, behavior amongst peers, and engagement with the community are key components of this work. What we know about anthropological research more broadly is that anthropological doctoral research often requires some kind of field research. And in fact, Michelle Bezanson of Santa Clara University presented data at an AABA meeting a few years back that cited that 90% of the field doctoral projects that she was able to research out of literally hundreds and hundreds required some kind of field research. We need to think about what we're doing in these field settings since it is such a ubiquitous part of our data collection process. In science, we require growth attitudes. We recognize that we need to improve our methods. We want to pay attention to the techniques and model systems that we are using and our statistical approaches. We also like to update our literature cited whenever we can to make sure we are on top of recent publications. While also, we're finding that the theory that we're using as a framing reference for our work needs to be updated. In fact, the entire scientific endeavor is predicated upon growth attitudes. We also know that when it comes to field research, we might run into danger in many different settings. For example, you might be traveling to a dangerous part of the world. You might be engaging in research that is challenging, either physically or psychologically, or you might be dealing with colleagues and other researchers that may present some kind of harm to you. One issue with the way that we think about our work is that we don't always acknowledge this danger, and we don't always talk about how to protect ourselves and the people with whom we work so that we are all engaging in safe and ethically bounded research. To this end, several colleagues and I developed the Survey of Academic Field Experiences, or the SAFE study, back in 2013. This study was born from posts by Kate Clancy on her Scientific American blog called Context and Variation. After one post, Kate noted that several people had responded anonymously about having experienced sexual harassment and assault in research settings. Kate decided this probably needed to be investigated more broadly and brought together our team, which includes myself, Julianne Rutherford from the University of Arizona, Kate Clancy herself from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and Katie Hind, who is also here at Arizona State University. We have established that the field is a foundational component of many research workplaces. For many researchers, fieldwork is an essential early career experience, particularly in the sciences, including anthropology, geology, paleontology, ecology, and lots of other fields. Field spaces are often seen as exceptional. They are often outside of our home contexts. The duration of time that we are there is bounded, meaning that it is limited. The cultural context and rules might vary from what we are used to in our home settings. And sometimes this is taken as an excuse to suspend normal practices because we are doing very specific kinds of research when we are there. So what are the risks and rewards of this kind of thinking? Well, the rewards might be that we get a lot of research done because we're fully engaged in the project in this outside of home context that is bounded in time. However, the risk is that without adhering to the particular rules that govern our daily behavior in other settings, we might be putting ourselves in harm's way. To explore this further, the SAFE study collected information from 666 survey respondents for a qualitative and quantitative study. We also collected 26 long-form interviews, and we published these in two different publications in 2014 and 2017. For this study, we wanted to assess the qualities or salient aspects of fieldwork. We used the legal definitions of harassment and assault to construct questions that asked individuals about their experiences with harassment and assault in field settings. With regards to demographics, mostly women responded to our survey. Most of the individuals who responded were white, which actually reflects the demographics in our field. 75% of the individuals who responded were located in the United States, but 30 countries were in fact represented in this study. And 86% of the individuals self-identified as heterosexual. In this study, women were much more likely to report having experienced inappropriate comments or sexual remarks, and the experiences of men and women were actually statistically different. We did not have appropriate representation from non-binary individuals for their inclusion in this statistical analysis. In this study, our respondents reported working at, on average, 3 or more field sites. 38% of our respondents reported encountering a code of conduct at any of those field sites, and 22% of respondents reported encountering a sexual harassment policy at any of these field sites. We also know that individuals who were more likely to be targeted by these comments and by physical contact, unwanted comments, and unwanted contacts were trainees. And we use the term trainee in a very specific context here, just to say that individuals who are professionally less far along than more senior researchers and faculty, and thus have less power in the professional hierarchy, were more likely to be targeted. The idea of power is very important here. Who were the perpetrators for women? They were more likely to be someone superior to them in the power hierarchy. For men who reported harassment and assault, they were more likely to be targeted laterally by peers. As I mentioned, we also completed long-form interviews during which we gathered qualitative data on issues around safety in field research settings. And these were some of the stories behind those numbers. One respondent said, and I'm just going to repeat the bolded part here, "It's just a constant subtle attitude that makes you feel like you don't want to be there anymore." And that made me really mad too. That the idea that someone could take something I thought was great, would be great, and sort of take it away from me. As researchers exploring this phenomenon, we wanted to understand the experiences behind these numbers. To this end, we recontacted several study participants, asking them open-ended questions about their experiences participating in field research. We conducted 26 long-form interviews. 23 out of the 26 respondents self-identified as women. 21 out of 26 of the respondents self-identified as white. We oversampled minoritized researchers and folks in the LGBTQ+ community. In these interviews, we asked the following questions. How would you characterize your field experiences? Are there any particular incidences, good or bad, that you would like to share? What do you think it was about the climate at your field site that contributed to your experience? What do you think it would take to make sure that everyone has a positive and empowering field experiences? And how do you think your racial or gender identity or cultural background influenced your experience of the field? And finally, is there anything else you would like to tell me today? After collecting, coding, and analyzing these data, we found that there were certain concepts that kept emerging from the data. People experienced tests, meaning that someone in the group who was someone senior to them with regards to power and experience tested whether they could achieve certain goals during the course of the field season. There were gender divisions of labor. Individuals reported feeling alienated from their field project or the data they collected. And of course, there were experiences of harassment and assault. And what we noticed in these data were that there were no codes of conduct establishing expected behavior, or that the codes of conduct were not enforced appropriately. And when this happened, people were more likely to experience these negative outcomes. It turns out that clear rules regarding behavior and enforcement of these guidelines are one key step towards limiting incidents of sexual harassment and assault. So we need to think a bit about who needs to be the change here. Principal investigators are the first line of defense against sexual harassment and assault and unfair labor practices in the field. Site directors and managers are also responsible. Dissertation advisors need to be aware of where they are sending their students to the field. And respected senior scholars need to set the stage for the kind of behavior that is appropriate and acceptable at their field sites. Instructors and graduate students who are embarking upon your own research, what do you want to be the standards that everyone must abide by at your field site? And how can you construct a code of conduct that will help you ensure that everyone who works with you knows that there are ways to conduct themselves that are most appropriate? Lynn Isbell and colleagues did a paper several years back where they talked about how these issues around sexism, sexual harassment and assault, and all of its manifestations show up in lots of different contexts. And so one example was that women were underrepresented as highlighted speakers at the AABA meetings over 21 years, despite being the majority of graduate students that we have had in our discipline for years. As we finish up here, I want to add that there are people who reported that they had very safe field experiences. And one person reported that their field director gathered everyone around, listed the ground rules, told everyone to come to them and to speak to them if anything was going wrong, and that he would know how to deal with it or handle it appropriately. And that is, in fact, our responsibility as the leads at these research sites. This is a vexing issue. So Southeastern archaeologists did a similar study to the SAFE study and found similar numbers. 76 individuals who participated in the study had experienced harassment and assault. A study of undergraduate women in physics reported that 73% had experienced harassment. Planetary sciences are having similar issues. Kate Clancy went on and did a paper in 2017 where she shows a double bind of gender and race for people with intersecting identities, where they are more likely to experience this kind of discrimination. And we know that trainees in academic medicine are also experiencing similar rates of harassment and assault. We need to treat workplaces as workplaces and recognize that the field is a workplace and not a space that is liminal and thus suspended from the rules. We need to prioritize the people that we work with over our data. The safety of our colleagues, the safety of our trainees, and the safety of the study participants are the most important factors. We need to recognize and acknowledge inappropriate behavior by colleagues and know to whom and how to report those behaviors. This means that we need to establish clear guidelines about reporting inappropriate behavior, and we need to formalize and encourage collegial behavior. So as we go back through and think about growth attitudes in science and all of the things that we mentioned earlier, like improving techniques and model systems, statistical approaches, updating our literature cited, and refining theory, we also want to embrace inclusivity and equity in research opportunities. And that will mean as we develop our IRBs and permissions to gather our data, be that paleoanthropological data, primatological data, qualitative data, archaeological, geological, or ecological data, we also need to be thinking about how to create an equitable and inclusive field space. And it is on us to create these spaces so that everyone who wants to engage in this research is safe to do so. Thank you. Thank you to my collaborators, and thank you to the participants in our study for helping us to think through this issue in field research.